All right, Your Worship. Stephanie has confirmed that we're live.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll just make sure if you're not speaking, you're on mute, please. It's 5 o'clock, time to get down to business. So I will call the Monday, June 21st, 2021 council meeting to order. Today, we acknowledge that Collingwood is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society. And today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. It coincides with summer solstice, the longest day of the year. And for the balance of this week, Town Hall will be lit in orange from Monday evening through to next Monday. And orange is refers to the story of Phyllis Webstat. On her first day at residential school, she wore a brand new orange shirt that her grandmother had given her to celebrate her first day at school. And upon arriving at school, all her clothes were taken from her, including the orange shirt, never to be returned. Miss Webstat has been quoted saying, "My feelings didn't matter, how no one cared, and I felt like I was worth nothing." All of us little children were crying and no one cared. So orange, in recognition of Orange Shirt Day, is recognized annually on September 30th and was recently elevated to a federal statutory holiday. The color orange has become symbolic of recognizing the struggles caused by the residential school system. And we've all recently had the horrific reminder with the discovery at Kamloops. And Maurice Sinclair, who was chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2017, said the following: "And until people show that they have learned from this, we will never forget, and we should never forget, even once they have learned from it, because this is part of who we are. It's not just a part of who we are as survivors and children of survivors and relatives of survivors. It is part of who we are as a nation, and this nation must never forget what it once did to its most vulnerable people." That I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda, and the motion reads that the content of the council agenda for June 21, 2021 be adopted as presented. And I've got a mover and a seconder, Councillor Berman and Councillor Madigan, and Councillor Deputy Mayor. You've got an amendment. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just would like or appreciate the opportunity to withdraw 16.11 under older deferred business.
Duly noted. Thank you. Any other additions or changes to the agenda today? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we progress, you know the drill. Just bring it up and let us know the general nature thereof, please. Adoption of the minutes. Resolution reads that the minutes of the following meetings of council be approved as presented. A regular meeting of council held May 31, 2021. A special meeting of council held June 3, 2021. And a special meeting of council held June 11, 2021. I'll look for a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Berman and Councillor Madigan. Are there any errors or omissions, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Is there any business arising from the previous minutes, council? Seeing none, we'll move on then to item 5.1, the introduction of the new Collingwood Public Library CEO. And I will turn it over to Councillor Berman to introduce our library chair, Nina Robitaille, who will do the introduction of the new CEO. Go ahead, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Oh, what have I done here? Yes, Chair Auntie Nina Robitaille of the Library Board has prepared a statement to congratulate and introduce our new CEO that's replaced Ken. And I think I'm safe to say on behalf of Ken, he couldn't be happier. So I'll pass it over to Nina.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nina. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for giving me some time today. I just wanted to share the The news, the board is very pleased to introduce Ashley Kulchycki as the newly appointed Collingwood Public Library CEO. Ashley earned a Master of Library and Information Services from the University of Western Ontario, and then began her career in library services in Manitoba, where she provided exceptional service to patrons in all aspects of library programs and services. Ever focused on development, Ashley pursued postgraduate certification courses and volunteer experiences, which helped her gain the knowledge required to fulfill a senior leadership role in the public library system. She completed the Advancing Public Library Leadership SOLS certification course, project management certification, and chose to volunteer as a member of the GTHS board, where she successfully sits as a board member and fills the role of chair of the governance subcommittee. Many of you will know Ashley as the supervisor of children and teen services. Ashley served our Collingwood community for the past 9 years. She initiated valuable staff training events, contributed to the library's health and safety practices, advocated through community outreach, partnership development, and municipal relationships. Most recently, stepping in as acting CEO while the board completed a thorough search for our next CEO. Ashley is a confident, knowledgeable library professional with a strong working knowledge of the Collingwood Public Library staff team, proven operational awareness, and valuable community connections. Ashley is an excellent motivator, leader, mentor to staff, and brings a keen awareness of our community's needs to the role of CEO. The board is thrilled that Ashley accepted the CEO position, and we look forward to a successful future.
Thank you, Nina. And welcome, Ashley. We know you have big shoes to fill, but we also know you'll chart your own course and you'll do a wonderful job. And it's your opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you so much. And I would agree, yes, I do have big shoes to fill, but I'm ready for that challenge. And I think first and foremost, we're going to get past COVID and really respond to what our community needs. And we're going to see what the future has on the horizon. And we're really looking forward to it here. So, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you. So thank you so much for inviting me to this meeting today and for the lovely introduction, Chair Robitaille. And you're on mute, Mayor Saunderson.
I think I'd get better than that by now. Well, thank you to both of you, and we'll look forward to hearing from you both in the future. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I forgot, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank CAO Skinner and HR Director McQuaig for being part of the hiring team through this whole process.
Good, thank you. All right, we'll let you guys get back to your day jobs. Thank you. That brings us to item 6, the interim control bylaw updates. 6.1 is the update on water capacity, and 6.2 update on land use planning study. And I'll turn it over to CAO Skinner to start us off, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just a point of order. Sorry, we've missed item number 5 on the agenda.
Well, that was the introduction on my agenda. Have we got different agendas?
Item 5 is community announcements.
Oh, sorry, community announcements. You're right. I did gloss over community announcements. I know that's just because I was avoiding the deputy mayor gloating, but it is to all now. So we're into a series, but thank you for that, Councillor McLeod. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor to start us off.
Thank you. I do not have anything this evening. Thanks.
And
next, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I'm going to steal a phrase from American politics and say that I would like to yield time to Fire Chief Parr. He has a sad announcement to make that I will add some comments to at the end. Fire Chief Parr.
Chief Parr, you're the beneficiary of Councillor McLeod's time. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick announcement. We had Fire Captain Paul Hurst pass away last week. It was sad loss for the fire department. Paul served with the fire department, first started with the town with the clerk's department as deputy clerk, and then moved over to the fire department, became a captain, and then retired in the early 2000s. So we'll all miss him. There's a little service on Friday that we're attending practicing the COVID protocol, but I think that's about all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor McLeod?
Paul's loss is not just a loss for the fire department in the town of Collingwood. It's a loss for the curling club and also for the Collingwood Agricultural Society and the Great Northern Exhibition. He was the president of both. He was a very, very prolific volunteer and a good friend to the town. And he will be sorely, sorely missed, not only for his volunteering, but also for his tremendous laugh. And my heart goes out to his widow, Donna, and to his children and at this time. And I would like to offer our sympathies as a council and as a town.
Well said. Thank you, Councillor McLeod. And we join you in sending our condolences and sympathies to his family. Councillor Comey.
Mine's being sticky too, my mute button. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I am pretty sure this is our last full week of school here in town. So it's a great opportunity to thank all our administrators and educators for getting our young people through this really challenging time. And they've really extended themselves, and as have our students. So to the youth of our community and all our educators and administrators who support them, we just want to thank them so much for getting us through this really unusual time, and looking forward to whatever summer can bring and some normalcy come the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Comey. And although the kids aren't physically getting out of school, they will be on the streets a little more than normal. So we ask all our residents to please use caution when you're driving around town. There will be kids on our streets all day, not just during breaks. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, and fantastic words, Marion. That was a wonderful tribute and to a well-deserved guy. On a different note, congratulations to the new owners of the Outpoint. I know it's outside of our purview, but it has been a staple in this community since, I think, 1967. So I want to congratulate the new team that bought out there. With all the restrictions and kind of negative things that have followed businesses over the last year and a half with COVID changing the world as we know it. It's nice to see a couple of guys that I know and I'm in business with and other things band together and put forward a wonderful way to continue the legacy of the Outpoint in our area. And even though it is in the town of the Blue Mountains, I'm sure everyone at this table has eaten there. They're famous for their beer passport. If you drink all 48 beer over a year or 6 months, you get a t-shirt. Well, the new owners have decided to add 4 to it. So the challenge has been accepted by many around. Marion, I like those eyes, the way you reacted. We will go out and do our best to represent Collingwood in every positive way we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. And I hear you might have been out there sampling their foodware. So how many stars?
I give it 5 stars. My date for the evening was 6 stars in the wrong direction for Councillor Berman. It's pretty sad when a guy has to pick him to be my date, but God bless. Anyways, no, it was fantastic food. They kept it the same. The atmosphere was great, and it was nice to see. It was nice to see people getting back to a little bit of normalcy outside. I wish them the best and continued success.
As do we all. And you caught Councillor Berman off guard. He had to use all his cards there. He didn't know which one to hold up. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and nothing for me this evening.
Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Yes, try the pretzels. They were amazing. And thank you to Councillor Comey for her comment. My daughter submitted her last assignment of grade 12 today, and then I see my wife's decorated the front of the house in banners or something for graduation, but I've already made the first university payment, so the timing seems to be off. And a belated happy first day of summer to everybody. I drove by the waterfront about 7 o'clock on Saturday night. We went to the terminals, we went to Sunset, we went behind McDonald's, my wife and Barney and I didn't see a single thing that seemed to raise an eyebrow. Everybody seemed well behaved, and I hope the feedback into the town was just as good. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Nothing this evening, Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
I have one announcement. I was able to get my second jab today. So, and I did it through the provincial booking site. They have sites in a number of municipalities. We went down to Barrie today through the health unit. They are processing about 1,750 people a day, and they had appointments throughout the week. So for all those that are interested in getting their second shot, they are available, and they have Moderna and Pfizer. So if you've got AstraZeneca the first time, it's a good way to augment that. So as we move forward and start getting open, I would encourage everybody who intends to get the vaccination to get out there and get it now. And that brings us then to item 6, and we've already introduced it. So I'm just going to pass it over then to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will again deliver the update, and we do have both Director Slama and Interim Director Glenn available for your difficult questions. And I think that there's a presentation that Stephanie can pull up for the public, please. Thank you. Next slide. So I've gone over this each time, but the council has asked us to update each week and at least once when there are meetings, all of these items that are listed, and I can commit to you that these items are all covered in the deck you'll see right now. And the next slide, please, is the situation. And I do like to go over this, even though it hasn't changed a lot. What we've done has changed a lot, but the situation is still the same. We have a water supply that's safe and available. As soon as they were aware of this difficult situation, council, each of you took a proactive and transparent approach to seek further capacity through any means we could, and to manage that which is remaining as an extremely high priority. So with our chlorine maximized, which was one of the first decisions, first things that we did, we do have a couple of years of growth available, depending, but not enough to get us at the current rates to the 2025 plant expansion. So council's used an interim control bylaw to temporarily and transparently pause most development so that we grow as a complete community and not all of one type of growth, making sure we have jobs, making sure, for example, that we have affordable housing as we move forward. So I'm going to give you an update today about our land use policy study, how we've been accelerating construction of the new expanded plant and seeking water from other municipalities. And I do want to say that work that doesn't use more water, such as most residential renovations and additions can continue. And if you have any questions about that, there is an entire page, a series of pages on the town's website on the Engage portal, answering a lot of the commonly asked questions. Next slide, please. So the first part is going to be about the water capacity. The next slide. So since our last update, we do have now the 4 proposals from engineering consultants for the design of the water treatment plant. The evaluation is underway. I think we have a really good team, internal team doing that. And we have the option to complete interviews with the proponents, which we will likely do. We want to make sure we get the absolute A team to push this work forward for us. We are reaching out to consultants and getting their proposals for our third-party independent review of the chlorine to make sure that we're adding the optimal amount and that we understand any of the risks. I was able to also have with Director Slama and the CAO from New Tecumseth and 3 or 4 other executives from the staff in New Tecumseth, a short negotiation meeting late last week. And we have set up an additional meeting to follow soon. So I hope that we'll be hammering out any of the details to be able to bring back a recommended contract to council. And we have sent letters to the New Tecumseth and Town of Blue Mountain councils just to underline the ask from you, our council, to those other municipalities, asking for them to reduce the water supply that they take from Collingwood so that we'll be able to manage together to that 2025 timeline. And I realize the next slide, slide 6, I probably put it in the wrong place of this presentation. It belongs with the planning questions, but I'll answer it now. One of the questions that have come up since the last update is, can council reserve water for affordable housing? And the short answer is absolutely yes. Council is looking at a complete community, and that of course would include affordable housing. So there are some decisions in July that will come forward to council about anything that may be ready to go forward in the short term. And one of the decision considerations that's already been provided to staff for their recommendations is affordable housing. And then after the land use planning policy study is complete, there'll be recommendations for the post-interim control bylaw period. So once that's over, and council can absolutely look at how affordable housing aligns with their vision of a complete community and make decisions to allocate water specifically to affordable housing. So it is under control of council through both decisions on policies or bylaw and your individual decisions on things like exemptions. The next slide is back to the drinking water plant expansion. And it just shows that we are now in the stage where the engineering design has been closed, and we're about to get in, we hope early July, the award of the engineering design. Next slide, please. The remaining water supply chart is here, and we can go through all the details, but I won't go through all the details. There's two probably very important numbers. The first ones are the bolded ones, about 2/3 of the way down. And it's the remaining single development units right now, which is an equivalent of single houses that are remaining. And that's looking at the winter constraints. So as of the 18th of June, we were at 863 remaining in the winter. And then in the summer, we do have at the bottom right, 1,773 remaining. But of course, it's a bit of a complex calculation in that people also use more water in the summer. So the 863 is where we are after the exemptions and any permits that were issued in the last few weeks, exemptions to date. So that would be the ones for Summit View and Eden Oak are already included in that number. And that's amount remaining after they've been allocated water. The next slide is the land use planning. So we're moving over to the planning side, the land use planning policy study. And the next slide shows that we've had a very significant step happen this week. So today we're at the stage where we've selected the consultant, and we're just starting the kickoff to carry out the study, which will include the public and development community consultation. Interim Director Glenn had a kickoff this afternoon, and the folks involved in the study are Meridian Planning Consultants led by Nick McDonald, and they're in a partnership with GM Blue Plan led by Chris Hamill. And they have further contracted with Glenn Potier from GLPI, who is a professional facilitator who will be able to work with us in looking at some of the community values and things that we can use to help with any water allocation or other decisions that we make going forward. So I expect now that the kickoff has happened that we'll have some more details about the steps the study will go through and the timing expected in the next week or two. So this is, in my mind, a very good development, and we thank those who provided proposals for this important work. Next slide, please. And since the last update, we have had the exemption request deadline for any immediate decisions to allocate water during the term of the study. And lots of appreciation to the development community and the community at large for putting in those proposals with high quality information that'll be very useful to council. We received 66 exemption requests, and they cover approximately 1,100 single development units worth of water, plus the industrial, commercial, institutional uses that are not yet quantified. And as well, sorry, there's just some stats that I've already gone over. Slide 12, please. And as well, this is a breakdown of the different types of permits and that have been issued. These numbers match the ones on the chart you saw earlier, but there's a little bit more information on the dwelling permits issued, which included 108 single homes, 18 semi-detached, 4 apartment conversions, and 12 row houses. And as well, we had 23 building permits come to completion with occupancy permits issued. And we do have a reasonable amount of uncompleted building permits from previous years also remaining active. I think you'll find these last 2 slides that are coming up also quite interesting because there's some new information that we hadn't provided previously. Slide 13, please. The chief building official was able to provide us with our 12-month accumulated dwelling starts as of the 18th, so last Friday. And the red dotted line through the middle is the 3-year median. So you'll see that from 2019, we were just under the median, and then we had a period of growth through till around the middle of last summer when the housing starts dropped off. And we're just making our way up to the median number. I expect once you make your decisions in July, we may be approaching that median number a little more closely. And the next slide gives an idea of the building permits issued from 2019 to 2021 by month. So in blue, the first bar in each set is the 2019 numbers. The orange, which is the second bar in each set, are the 2020 numbers. And the third bar, right up to June, because of course we don't have July numbers yet, are the bars from this year. So it's sort of interesting. Our building permits were down a bit in February, and of course in May, once we put in the interim control bylaw. But overall, depending on what happens with the water, you can see that we're in the ranges of previous years. And there's some valuations at the bottom of the slide, and we have $62.8 million of building permits issued this year in 2021 up till that June 18th date. And we compare to the same period last year, we were at 77.2 million. So we're a bit behind last year, but not far behind last year. And that's it for the update. And I would turn it back to the chair, and thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Council, are there any questions for the CEO on the update? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I guess my question back to slide 8 of the CAO's presentation in terms of the bold numbers of our current capacity and SDUs remaining. By way of explanation, I think for the public is the chlorine contact tank and or the UV disinfection system used with the goal of eliminating the winter-summer differential. And we saw the summer capacity underneath those bolded numbers. So can you explain using that slide, because though the chlorine tank is estimated and or the UV to be potentially 2 years, and how that capacity can impact us for the time remaining between when they're finished and getting to 2025.
CEO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that this would be a good time to ask Director Slama to delve into some of the numbers, because I think that is an important question for the public to understand the 2023 opportunities.
Director Slama, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the Mayor to Councillor Jeffrey. And I'll just ask if that slide could be put up again, and then it might help while we're looking at the numbers while I speak to it. But in general, you are correct, Councillor Jeffrey, right? If the option of advancing disinfection, the options that we're considering at the water treatment plant would be to restore the capacity, and we would move from 863 available SDUs in the winter, if we use today's numbers, to the 1773. And so if we're considering, we have asked that consultants look to advance this as quickly as possible. But if we say, okay, if we assume we won't have the infrastructure in place for this winter, but we will for the winter of 22-23, then that means we only have 863 to allocate for the next year and a half. And then beyond that point, we would have an additional approximately 900 then to allocate until the plant expansion is complete. And yeah, and I will say that, you know, we are keeping our options open, and we will consider in the design, when we're going through the detailed design of the plant expansion, if there's opportunity to bring additional capacity online in tandem or following the disinfection. But a couple of things have to happen for that. We do need to have our increased disinfection abilities, and then we would need to increase our capacity would require ministry approval in that interim period. But it is something that we will consider, and we will be discussing with the consultant when we make that final decision.
Follow up, Councillor Jeffrey.
That's great, thank you. And then again, just to thank the CEO out for asking my question regarding affordable housing. My concern wasn't, I mean, we do have a component of affordable or attainable housing perhaps being addressed by developers, but my question was more of a concern as how the town of Collingwood gets into the queue with its own projects that may or may not be identified through the task force, and given the priority that affordable housing is. So I thank the CEO for addressing that.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Council, go ahead, CAO Skinner.
Thank you. Thank you through you to Councillor Jeffrey. Absolutely, and I do understand that it would include the town's own projects, and we'll make sure that our newly onboarded Meridian and GM Blue Plan consultants are aware of that with Director Glenn.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I have two questions regarding this presentation, and one of them is regarding the water. And on slide number 5, it is said that there's been a short negotiation meeting to review outstanding conditions and an additional meeting to follow soon. And I remember on a previous slide deck on this topic that we were informed that there was to be soon a meeting including the MECP, and I would like to know where we're at on that because I believe the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks was going to sort of act as a liaison between the two municipalities.
CAO Skinner.
I'm pretty sure actually I saw Director Slama arranging that meeting, but I can't remember the date off the top of my head. If I could refer that date to Director Slama. And I think that we potentially are not as dependent upon the ministry as we thought we were, just because of the way the licenses are written. There's more flexibility than we thought. Not that we don't want to keep them in the loop, because of course they have some expertise we'd like to leverage. If it's okay, then Director Slama, did you have the date available?
Go ahead, Peggy, please.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, through yourself to Councillor McLeod. CAO Skinner is correct. We haven't set the meeting with the ministry because through our discussions with through our discussions with Town of Blue Mountains and New Tecumseh, the interest in having a meeting with the ministry was to have a conversation with them if we were to reduce our the sale of water to those municipalities, how it would affect their licenses. And we have realized since that there isn't the dependency that we thought on there. So initially we wanted to have that conversation, to have a discussion and get their agreement. If so the other two municipalities were going to receive less water from us. It's not kind of the same conversation now. We would reach out and just look for their expertise, as CAO Skinner mentions, as we just talk about a change in supply with those municipalities. So we're working towards the negotiation with the municipalities before we have that discussion with the ministry now.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. And also on, I can't see which one it is. One of the slides, there was discussion regarding, oh, here we are, slide number 12. There was some discussion regarding building permits, and we've got certain amendments issued that have not yet been translated into occupancy permits. And so my question is not on this issue particularly, but just a little piece of information for me. Do building permits expire? And I'm thinking of this because of a topic that's going to come to us later in today's meeting.
We'll look through CAO Skinner or potentially any of our planning department on this one. Go ahead though first, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor McLeod. I don't know if they expire. I expect they do, but I don't know. And I was just scrolling through to see if CBO Miller is on the call, but I don't see him there. Be very happy to follow up.
That's fine with me. Thank you so much.
Any other questions, Council? Councillor Hamlin.
I'll just offer up, if I can be of assistance to Councillor McLeod, they do expire, but there's authority for them to be extended. I think it's 6 months, but don't hold me to that.
And we'll get confirmation, I think, through staff on that for you. Are there any other questions, Council? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, deputations. 7.1. Relief of development charge fees, re 223 Oak Street, Collingwood. We have Mr. Darko. Hopefully I'm going to say this right. Naumovski. Is Mr. Naumovski present? Looks like the audio is just connecting. Mr. Naumovski, can you hear us?
Yep.
Hopefully I've said your last name right. My apologies if I haven't.
You said it perfectly.
Well, it's good to have you, sir, and you have 10 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Is it, am I good?
Yep, we can see you and we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Dear Mayor Saunderson and Council. Yeah, I can hear you fine. Okay, sorry. I've got feedback going on my computer now. So the reason for the deputation has to do with sorry, I've got feedback going. The reason for the deputation is to do with the letter that I sent to council and you as mayor regarding relief from development charges. At 223 Oak Street. And hopefully you've read the letter. And sorry, I've got two screens going and I'm just going to close this.
That's okay. You're coming through loud and clear for us. It may be your
from my
perception.
computer. Yeah, no. So basically, I'm I'm not a developer. I'm an individual, and my wife and I own the property, and we're just trying to build a house. And I had no idea that the process was going to be so arduous, and it seems like every time I take one step forward, I get 3 steps back. First was just trying to get a building permit, and then got ICBL, and then I was told I can't get a building permit, and then a couple of weeks later I was told I can get a building permit, and then I was told that I had to pay $45,000 on development charges, which, after picking myself up, I was trying to understand why. So throughout this whole process, I think a combination of just delays with as a result of COVID, trying to educate myself through the whole process. I'm just looking for, I guess, some kind of relief regarding the development charges for this property. I'm sure council, and as well as you, Mayor, are familiar with this property. It's an infill lot. It's only 35 feet wide. It's an existing lot that is serviced by town water and wastewater services. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is 5 years from the demolition of this building was October 20th, 2020. So had I received a building permit on October 19th, 2020, I would be exempt from development charges. Had I received the building permit on October 21, 2020, I would have to pay the development charges. And I'm just trying to understand how an existing town lot from one day to another goes from not having development charges to being levied development charges. What I understand is development charges are levied on brand new developments, similar to the new developments being built in town where there are no existing services. So I'm just, I guess, trying to get a better understanding on how I was levied these development charges. I've read the bylaw a number of times. I wish it was clear. I wish the building services, when they accept your application for a building permit, would make mention that these would be either building fees. I know there is a schedule, but on a per application basis, they're really, it's not that clear. So I don't want to keep going on, but basically all I'm looking for is some kind of relief. I know that in the schedule there are 2 separate schedules, one for rural development and one for an urban development, and the rural development is exempt of water and wastewater charges. I don't know if I would fall into that category or not, considering there are services on this, again, existing services. So anyways, like I said, I don't want to take up council's time. You guys are busy, and I just appreciate you reviewing this and giving this some consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Naumovski. Council, are there any questions? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to see us, Mr. Naumovski. Did you know in advance of putting in for your building permits that there was a date by which, after which you have to pay an extra $45,000?
No, I didn't.
At any point along the way in your conversations with our building department or planning department or whomever you were you ever informed of that?
No, I received as I said, I received a notification from the CVO saying that this was affected by the interim control bylaw. And then about 2 weeks later, I received another email from the CBO saying that he's looked at the file again and has now granted a building permit, providing that basically the fees were paid. And I just assumed that the fees to be paid were a building permit fee, which is less than $3,500, and a security deposit of a grading security deposit of roughly $3,100. Those are the fees I thought I would have to pay. And then subsequent email, I was told that I had to pay those fees as well as roughly $45,000 in development charges. That's the first I knew of the development charges.
Thank you. And how?
Councillor?
Yes, thank you. How much did you miss the deadline by?
So we purchased the property in June of 2019 with the intent that we were going to start. It was a vacant property, and we were going to start building as soon as possible. And then, obviously, in March of 2020, everything went into lockdown, and so just trying to get. Like, I've still not met with my architect. Everything has been done over between Zoom and phone calls, and so any face-to-face meetings were we weren't able to have them. So to answer your question, we went in for a building permit in December 10th of 2020, and as I said, the building permit now has been granted, providing that the fees are all paid, and that happened in the end of May.
Any follow-up, Councillor?
Just one more, and I'm wondering, did the person from whom you purchased the property tell you about the 5-year deadline on the demolition permit?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Council, any other questions for Mr. Naumovski? All right, thank you very much for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much for your consideration, and happy first day of summer.
And to you too.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 8 on the consent agenda. And the resolution reads that council hear and receive the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are that of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. There are 5 items today. 8.1 Proclamation, St. John Ambulance Week, June 21 to 27, 2021. The Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit thank you letter for 2 municipalities. 8.3 Draft Plan Approval Extension, Panorama Development. 8.4 Grey County Roundabout Gateway Feature, Grey Road 19, Simcoe Road 34, and Mountain Road intersection. And 8.5 FCM Resolution Strengthening Canada's Hate Speech Laws. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Madigan and Councillor Jeffrey. First, I'll call the vote to receive it, and then I'll ask for any items to be pulled. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Are there any members to be pulled on the any items to be pulled on the consent agenda tonight? I've got Councillor Hamlin, then Councillor Comey, and then Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
It would be both 8.4 and 8.5.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Comey?
8.5, please.
And Councillor Doherty?
Thank you. Also 8.4.
All right. Well, we'll start with 8.4 then. And Councillor Hamlin, you're first out of the gates. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This matter that I've asked to be pulled is a piece of correspondence from Grey County. And they're asking Collingwood whether we would like to participate in a gateway feature in the roundabout that's going to be on the border between the town of Collingwood and the town of Blue Mountains. And the roundabout's going to be where Mountain Road meets our boundary road with the town of Blue Mountains, which is variously called, I think, County Road 19 and 21. And so my point in pulling this was to ask to have a resolution to ask staff to give us advice as to whether this is a good idea for us to participate in and what the cost would be. I'd hate for us to, as a council, not react to this at an opportunity, and then lose our chance. So I noticed the letter came in May and they have asked for a response at the end of June, but I don't think this is going to be built anytime in the coming months. So subject to staff's thoughts on this, this would just come back in the fullness of time. And I did believe that Director Slama may have done some investigation on this pending today's meeting. And if she did, would this be an appropriate time to ask her to fill us in a bit?
Director Slama.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through yourself to Councillor Hamlin. Yes, I did reach out to the county just to ask a couple of questions. So the letter is requesting a response from Collingwood Council, and if there's an interest in a shared gateway feature at a roundabout that's planned where Mountain Road meets Osier Bluff Road, which is grade 19 and 21. And it sounds to me as this concept is in the beginning stages, and the questions that are asked in the letter, I feel that we can't really answer those questions because we don't know enough about what some of the ideas would be about the feature. Maybe we would just decide to do our own feature on Mountain Road and not be part of something that's in the roundabout, and we don't know the costs to construct it or what would be proposed for ongoing maintenance costs. So I think there is an opportunity, though, to be part of the discussion with Grey County and Simcoe County and Town of the Blue Mountains. And my recommendation would be for us to partake in those conversations and have a discussion of some of the ideas on the feature, and then we could bring a report back to council on what some of the concepts and some of the costs, and council could make a final decision after that point.
All right, thank you. Follow up, Councillor Hamlin?
No, just a big thank you.
All right, I'm going to look to the clerk. Do we need any direction from council on that or notice of motion to deal with that moving forward? Sarah?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hamlin did reach out prior to the 24 hours, providing notice that she may be requesting further direction on this item. In speaking with Director Slama this afternoon, we do have a motion, should council wish to, if Councillor Hamlin would wish to put it on the floor, that council direct staff to participate in a design exercise with Grey County, County of Simcoe, and the Town of Blue Mountains for a Town of Collingwood gateway / entry feature within the roundabout, with a follow-up report to council, including an opinion on shared capital costs and annual operating cost contributions. And I believe this is a resolution similar to what Town of Blue Mountains has put forward.
All right, Councillor Hamlin, would you like to move that?
I would, thank you.
All right.
Click on this.
And before I get a seconder, I'm going to go to Councillor Doherty. You would also ask to pull this item, and then I'll look for a seconder. So go ahead, Councillor Doherty, please.
Yes, thank you, Bishop. And my comments were very similar to those of Councillor Hamlin in that I think that this is a great opportunity for us. This is a significant gateway to our community. And I would be very happy to second Councillor Hamlin's motion.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on item 8.4, Council? Seeing, go ahead, Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just a clarification through you to the clerk. I have no issue with this notice at all, but I thought Councillor Hamlin provided the notice to you, but I thought reading what we had passed to address this a couple of years ago was that when this was going to happen off a consent item, that the item would be vetted and council would be notified as soon as practical prior to the meeting so we could be prepared for it. So in this case, I don't have any issue with this motion. It's just, could I have known about it a half an hour, 2 hours ago, so I could speak intelligently to it? Or am I wrong that that wording's been changed since then?
Look to Clerk Almus, go ahead.
Certainly. So that's not a requirement in our procedure bylaw, section 2.12, as long as it's provided in advance to us. And at this point, I did have a conversation with Councillor Hamlin, and we weren't actually sure until there was further follow-up this afternoon that there would be a motion for this item. I'm just taking a look here. So as noted in that section, if a member of council does not feel that they have sufficient time to make an informed decision on this, that you can request the matter be deferred. But since it was a simple request to participate until we understood the costs, staff felt that it would be potentially appropriate to bring forward this evening. Otherwise, it can be deferred to next meeting.
Okay. No, thanks for the clarification. I'll completely support it. I was reading a thing that we passed at an SIC meeting back in 2019, which I thought was an update to the procedural bylaw. So I just want to make sure we were doing it correctly. Thank you. I'll support this. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, council, before I call the vote? Seeing none, all in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 8.5. Go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you again. This is a letter that FCM has forwarded to our town talking about their support of the resolution that came from our town. In fact, my resolution to strengthen our hate speech laws. And I wasn't sure, so the reason I asked this to be pulled is there has been a lot of press lately about our federal heritage minister bringing forward hate speech legislation, particularly to address online hate speech. And it is his intent to bring it forward before the summer recess. And there's been more and more about this recently in the press. And it just, I just felt when I saw this, that this is a good opportunity for us to ask the federal minister to consider adding in our needs on, that have been expressed and taken forward to FCM on strengthening hate legislation with respect to symbols. So I had a brief discussion with Clerk Almus this afternoon. In fact, I originally thought that I would be asking for us to send a letter to FCM for them to, make this inquiry of the federal government. But Clerk Almus has suggested that there's no reason, perhaps, if council was to be supportive of this, that we as a town through our mayor could be writing our federal heritage minister and specifically asking that they consider including hate speech with, with respect to symbols in their pending legislation. So that's my request and comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. I saw Councillor Jeffrey has her card up as our FCM rep, and I would note also that council, as part of the initial motion, authorized letters from the mayor both to the Prime Minister and the Premier dealing with these issues as well. And I'll look to Councillor Jeffrey maybe for some background on the FCM resolution and what that was intended to.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, and through to Councillor Hamlin. That was exactly FCM's strategy in terms of their report to the Board of Directors, was how significant the timing of this was and being able to dovetail it while they were already seeing movement from the federal government with respect to the online. So I don't believe there's any need for us to micromanage this. I believe FCM has it well in hand. They understand the opportunity that's before them and what their membership wants. And I have no doubt they're the best for this job. That's my comment.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Hamlin?
Yes, well, that's great news. The report back, I guess, that I recall from FCM was they were going to embark on, lobbying efforts. So I hadn't realized this was exactly the intent, and I'm very happy to hear that. So, yeah, great. No need to do anything further. I don't think, at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Comey, you had your card up.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So yes, still speaking to item 8.5, the FCM resolution, and then what I'll finish, perhaps Councillor Hamlin, Councillor Jeffrey's thought on is that we are told that the letter will be shared with us. So I look forward to that also being included in the consent agenda so we can see that exact wording and what it captures. But in addition to thanking Councillor Jeffrey for getting this in front of FCM, I think it's an important time to remember how it all started and what a beautiful story of passionate community activism that it truly was. That petition still lives online. It has over 35,000 signatures. It was started by one very brave mother who wanted to make a difference in her community. And for a long time, no one listened. And it was moved forward by Councillor Hamlin in her dedicated motion and all the work that went into it, and that it was supported unanimously by our council. So I think, and I hope, it will long live as a story that shows the difference when we think globally, but act locally. And as a community, we truly owe a thank you and a debt of gratitude to this incredible mom and all those who supported her to get where it was today. And I very much think it's imperative that this council continue to follow up and see where this lands. And I don't consider it micromanaging at all. I consider it us living up to the obligation that we made to our community and that mom. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item, Council? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and minutes, which is item 9. The resolution reads that the minutes of the following boards be hereby received and recommendations contained therein be approved. 9.1 Collingwood Public Library minutes, special meeting May 25, 2021, and special meeting June 4, 2021. Can I get a mover? Well, I'll get our library rep to move that, Councillor Berman, and who will second that, please? Councillor Madigan. And I will call the vote then. All in favor? Are there any questions arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10, Standing Committee Report. Strategic Initiatives meeting of June 7, 2021. The resolution is that Council received the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee Report from its meeting held June 7, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. 1, Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. The recommendation is to adopt a Community and Safety Wellbeing Plan. Item 2, CAO 2021-8, Collingwood SDG Pioneer Town 2021 Habitat in Towns Collingwood World Summit. The recommendation is to approve continuing to work with the UN Habitat and Urban Economy Forum to advance the Collingwood SDG Pioneer Town Initiative, including the 2021 Habitat in Towns Collingwood World Summit, and endorse in principle the proposed pilot projects. Item 3, CAO 2021-9, Operational Plan Q1 Progress Report. The recommendation is to receive the report. Item 4, T 2021-4, 2021 Final Tax Rates. Recommendation to enact a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of 2021 tax levies. Item 5, T 2021-8, 2020 financial year-end memo. And the recommendation is to approve the final surplus allocation to fund the prior year's accumulated capital deficit. And item 6 is T 2021-9, water and sewer arrears. status and future actions. The recommendation is to commence actions to disconnect water service and tax roll outstanding water arrears, undergo an initiative to improve the water billing and collection process, and prepare an analysis of water and wastewater billing arrears. And item 7 is T 2021-10, 2021 Q1 financial report, and the recommendation is to receive for information. These are all items that were approved unanimously at the standing committee meeting. If anybody would like, first I need to get a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Madigan. If there's anybody that would like to pull one of these items for a change in the recommendation. Councillor Comey.
Yes, would you kindly pull the UN Habitat, please?
Yes, we'll pull item 2. Are there any other items to pull for a change of direction, Council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. We're voting on all save and except for item 2, which is CAO 2021-8 Collingwood SDG Pioneer Town. All in favor of the other items? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Comey.
Oh, I don't wish to change the thing. I won't be supporting this particular initiative.
Okay. Unless there's any, so I'll use the same movers and seconders then, if they're okay with that. And I'll be calling the vote then on the Collingwood Habitat SDG Pioneer Town resolution. All in favor? Opposed? That is so noted. And in future, you could just sever them out, Councillor, and then you can get the no vote in. We just vote on them separately.
Thank you.
And that brings us to bylaws. Item 10.1.2, the resolution is that bylaw number 2021-41 being a bylaw to set the tax rates and to levy taxes for the year 2021 be enacted and passed this 21st day of June 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. Any questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 10.1.3, that bylaw number 2021-42 being a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of sums required by the Collingwood Business Improvement Area for the year 2021 be enacted and passed this 21st day of June 2021. I'll have that moved by the Deputy Mayor as our BIA representative. And can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Jeffrey. Any questions or comments before I call the vote? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And through you, I guess perhaps to CAO Skinner or to Treasurer Quinlan, there had been a request from the BIA for town to waive or defer the payment of taxes specifically for the BIA levy. And I'm just wondering what happened to that request.
CAO Skinner.
It was maybe I could ask a question. I don't think that was a resolution. I don't recall that one being an active ask of staff, but maybe I've missed something. Thank you.
Councillor Doherty.
Yeah, if I may, I'm, you know what, in truth, I do not recall whether it went to a request to staff and I'm embarrassed for that. However, I do recall very specifically that there was a request from the BIA for the council to consider it. So I guess I'm asking if there had been any consideration, sounds like there may not have been, and what the resolution was.
I don't know. I will look to, was this at the SIC or what meeting was this at, Councillor?
Your Worship, it would go back like at least a month, if not 2 months. There, I see the Deputy Mayor with your hand up. Perhaps he can help.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead, please.
Thank you. To be honest, I don't recall any recent request or definitive direction that was given by the board for this request. I think that there was genesis of conversation going back to the outset of COVID, and as part of their presentation to the task force that was put in place,
Yes.
I think that was one of the bullet points that they hit on as potentially an opportunity for the municipality to assist. But truthfully, I don't believe it went any further than that. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think that there has been a formal request at this point.
Does that assist, Councillor?
Yes, it does. And I apologize. I stand corrected.
Okay.
Your worship.
So I guess we're back to the vote then on the bylaw. And unless there's any questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 10.2, which is the standing committee report for corporate community services of June 7th.
Can I just, sorry, may I interrupt for one moment?
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Did the treasurer want to comment on that?
Treasurer Quinlan?
Sorry, yes, your worship. I was trying to just look through the operational plan, and I don't remember if it was Councillor Berman that had mentioned, it looks like it was a request as part of the COVID timing, or sorry, Deputy Mayor Hull had brought that up. I'm not sure that there was actually a resolution, but I do have it in my plan to work through in Q3, just to look at a similar situation that the City of Calgary used a portion of the COVID funding that they received from the province to help alleviate some pressure on the BIA. What we do need to understand first is just exactly where those funds are going to be applied. So that's where we're working through today. And then the plan was, as part of Q3, that we could bring some information forward to council to review.
Good, thank you. I've got the Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Doherty. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you to the treasurer, I appreciate you reminding us of that. Definitely the City of Calgary rings a bell, and I do recall the correspondence that came from the general manager of the BIA through to the board. And I believe there was actually a municipality within Ontario that followed suit in their application. And it was a municipality that was more in line with us from a lower tier population standpoint. But again, I stand to be corrected.
Thank you. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Only to thank the treasurer to provide me with some indirect assurance that I haven't completely lost my mind.
We should all be so lucky. All right. So we'll move on to item 10.2 then. And the resolution reads, the council received the Corporate Community Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held June 7, 2021, and hereby approve the recommendations contained within the report as presented. And item 1 is the Community Carbon Footprint Challenge, Collingwood Climate Action Team. And the recommendation is that council form a team and participate in the carbon footprint analysis. Item 2 is HR 2021-1, closure of municipal offices during the 2021 holiday season. And I'll look to Chair McLeod to move this and Vice Chair Madigan to second it. If they're comfortable with that. These are both items that were passed unanimously. Is there anyone that would like to pull an item to change the direction? All right, then, seeing none, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And this brings us to item 11, staff reports. And item 11.1. Make sure I've got this right. Is the P 2021-18 draft plan approval extensions. This was carried by a vote of 4-1. And so the resolution reads that staff report P 2021-18 draft plan approval extension request be received. And further, that council approve 3-year extensions of draft approval for the following plans of subdivision, including revisions to the associated conditions of the draft plan approval as contained in this report, with the draft approvals to lapse on June 29th, 2024. And the 3 developments are Bridgewater Residential Plan of Subdivision, D1202121, and Panorama, round bracket Mayor Mills Village, and bracket Residential Plan of Subdivision, D1202321, and Links View Residential Plan of Subdivision, D1202221. And further, that staff review each of the plans to ensure there is pedestrian connectivity and cyclist routes both within the plans and between each plan and surrounding community. And further, that staff review the street designs in each of the plans to ensure traffic calming is built into the designs as much as possible. We've got a mover and a seconder. This is DNO, so it will be Chair Hamlin and Vice Chair Jeffrey, if they're content with that. Council, any questions or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Hamlin, and then Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following our DNO meeting on Monday last week, I just sat down and thought more about how all these subdivisions are going to fit together. We have before us the three, two on the 10th line and one on Mountain. And in 6 months, we're going to be having Red Maple, which is also on 10th line, come before us for an extension of draft plan approval. And also, of course, in that area is the Mayor's Mills development already existing, and the lovely development of Georgian Meadows. So I posed a few questions to staff at the end of last week, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to raise those questions now. The first one is directed to Director Slama through you, Mr. Mayor. And I know there's been a lot of discussion and information before us that some of the developers will be front-ending infrastructure relating to the Stewart Road booster facility. This is about water, and the extension of a trunk water main from 6th Street. And so my first question was, what lands are going to benefit from that? There's still a lot of development land in that area as well. And I just wanted to have a good understanding of who all the ultimate benefiting owners will be from this work. Not everyone, but I think there's an area that perhaps staff has identified. Thank you.
Director Slama.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through yourself to Councillor Hamlin. Yes, so the Stewart Road Reservoir, it will be designed to service through phases the west end of our pressure zone 2. So our water infrastructure is designed based on the pressure zones, which are delineated by the elevations of the land. So much of the area that is west of 10th line and around, I'll say, on both sides of Mountain Road, right to Osler Bluff Road or Gray Road 21. That is our pressure zone 2. And so all those lands have been included in the ultimate design for that reservoir.
Follow up, Councillor Hamlin?
Yeah, just one quick one. And so the front-ending agreement that I know will come back to us in the fullness of time for these subdivisions, that will allow for an orderly distribution that covers, you won't have to rebuild any pipes to cover other properties that run along that route.
Director Slama.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you repeat that question, please, Councillor Hamlin?
The purpose of my question was just to make sure that when we're negotiating this agreement and it comes forward back to council, that we aren't just doing an agreement that narrowly focuses on what the, I guess, 4 developments will need in terms of water, but that all the intervening properties will also be included in the sizing of the pipes and the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so we have had other discussions at committee and council about any kind of front-ending agreement or advanced timing agreement for this infrastructure. And we had previously entered into an advanced timing agreement with select developers, and we have committed to look at a front-ending agreement as per the DC Act. And my understanding of those agreements is that you would look at the full benefiting area and those costs be distributed over the lands. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hamlin?
Oh, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Thank you. My second question, and I believe that perhaps Manager Velek is going to be answering this one, but I was curious when we saw the 3 subdivisions together at DNO, how exactly the road network was going to work and how all the subdivisions were going to be connected with local and collector roads. So I was hoping to be enlightened this evening on that.
Manager Velek?
So all the subdivisions have connections to the north or south or east or west, whichever way they are, to the neighboring developments. The Linksview and Red Maple and Linksview and Red Maple, they will be local roads in the interim. We've preserved a 26-meter right-of-way in case it ever needs to be upgraded to a collector road, redesignated to a collector road. You speaking just roadways or trails as well?
So where all my questions, my questions really are concerning the fact we haven't done, a study of this area before now that would have sort of in a comprehensive way looked at where all the roads going to fit in, what is going to be a collector, how is this going to work from a roads perspective. And I could see from our presentation we got last Monday that staff's been thinking about this, but we haven't had the benefit of it coming to our council. And so I was just wondering if there was anything tonight you can share on it with us. I'm just a little bit worried that we're getting draft plans in place without knowing how the road network's going to fully function. Thank you.
Manager Velek?
Yeah, Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Hamlin, you're correct. There is no master road network plan for the west end of Collingwood. We are trying to preserve wider corridors where we think collector roads would logically go in the future. And we are trying to make those connections between the subdivisions as logical as possible. But you are correct that there is no overarching future road corridor network laid out in our official plan.
And as a supplement to that, Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor Saunderson, is I would be really concerned if these plans let me put it this way, if we don't have that kind of plan in place before these draft plans expire again. Because to me, it's critical piece of information to have when you're building a community of thousands of new people, that we sort of know how all the roads are going to work and where the car's going to go and, how are the pedestrians going to be safe. And I know that my questions are really going to be tied into our official plan that we're going to get, sometime in the next 6 months, because no one's turned their mind sort of the global sense in our town for a long time. So I just sort of want to know when, am I safe if I approve this tonight or add my vote to approving it, let's put it that way, that I'll be safe that we'll have an opportunity when this comes up again to add in any required road network information or changes. If that's clear. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll let the staff who would like to take that question.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead, Manager.
Yeah. You, Mayor Saunderson, to Councillor Hamlin. I think I'd like to add that the hierarchy of the road network, the higher order roads, the 10th lines, the mountain roads, the 6 streets, they've all been incorporated into our master transportation studies, and these developments have all fed into that study. And these populations have been estimated, and these higher order roads have been planned, intersection improvements timed, road widenings timed. So I think those roads, I think they have been planned. Whether there's ever going to be a collector road through Linksview to Osler Bluff Road is anyone's guess. In that circumstance, we have made the provision for a wider road allowance in case that ever happens. It may never happen, but we are trying to preserve the corridors so that we have that flexibility in the future. And similarly with the road through Red Maple over the river through RCD, is a long, long way out. We don't know, but we've tried to make those provisions to provide us that flexibility.
Yeah. Councillor Hamlin?
Yeah, thank you for that, Manager Velek. Mr. Mayor, my comment on this particular part is that I'm going to be, together with, well, I'll come back to exactly what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say I do have a concern that we haven't got a full understanding of how the road network is going to work within these subdivisions and how they're going to be connected. There are 2 school sites in these subdivisions, and kids will be crossing Mountain Road, and they'll be crossing 10th Line. And at DNO, I did ask Manager Velek if there would be a pedestrian crossing at least on 10th Line, and he said one hadn't been contemplated yet, but he could see that perhaps in the future that might be required. But we don't have any clause in our subdivision conditions requesting contribution towards payment. So to me, there's just a bit of a question around how that should work. My next question.
Councillor Emma, Manager Velek had his hand up, and then I know Senior Planner Brian's joined us, so maybe they want to weigh in, but I'll start with Manager Velek, and then I'll get to you, Senior Planner.
Yeah, for you, Mayor Saunderson, to Councillor Hamlin. In the last few days, I've looked through some of the older reports for the subdivision and looked at the draft conditions. And one of the conditions for Linksview is that they shall provide a traffic impact study and carry out the recommendations within that traffic impact study to the satisfaction of the town of Collingwood. So that is a draft condition. They have prepared a TIS, or traffic impact study, already that does recommend a crosswalk at the terminus of that main street and 10th Line. So there is a recommendation within their report for a crosswalk at that location. And a draft plan condition stating that they're to carry out the recommendations within that study. So I think we do have some ability to ask for a crosswalk at that location. So just wanted to update you on that since we last spoke at DNO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Manager. Senior Planner Brian.
Yes, Your Worship. This is a comment with respect to the front-ending agreement versus advanced timing financial agreement wording in 2 of the conditions, one in the Linksview draft plan conditions and the other in the Panorama Mare Mills Village condition. It looks like the conditions as currently presented to council include the phrase advanced timing prior to financial arrangement. And it's my understanding from talking to Director Slama that the reference to advanced timing needs to be deleted from the relevant conditions in each of those draft plan approvals. Right. So that it would just read financial arrangement.
And I see Director Slama nodding her head, so that will be done. I'm taking it that wording will be changed.
Okay, that's all that I have at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamlin, any follow-up?
No, but I have 2 further questions, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. The next is for Director Culver and Parks. And my concern question on Parks is based in my thought that we'll be, between the 2 existing subdivisions and adding 4 more at a minimum, we're adding several thousand people here. And I was wondering if an overall plan for parks has been done here and whether there's been any examination of the needs for, say, a community park for this end of town, and therefore the setting aside of lands in these draft plans for that. Thank you.
Director Culver.
Thank you, Mayor. So no, there hasn't been that kind of consideration. Each site plan has been looked at as a neighborhood of its own, and we've applied the usual process of looking at the 5% parkland dedication amount, looking at the nature of the proposed subdivision, looking at adjacent subdivisions and what the park allocations are in those areas, using the urban design manual to make sure that we have proximities as defined in that manual, and looking at the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan that was enacted in or affected in, I think it was 2017, I think, to help guide some of the outlooks for, what those parks should contain. But at this time for those developments, community parks were not contemplated. They are only neighborhood parks at this time.
Follow up, Councillor Hamlin.
Yeah, thank you. Would there be a condition in these plans that would allow for the setting aside of community park lands if it was determined, and I'm again assuming this is going to happen through our ongoing official plan study. So if it was determined that a community park was needed in that area, do we have sufficient conditions in our draft plans that would allow us to have that?
Through your worship, I'm going to have to defer to planning for that specific answer. I will note that the PRC master plan identifies community parks as destinations, so it's one of those things where it's a fairly blue sky question, unfortunately, and for us to be able to plan towards a destination without a justification that we clearly understand at this point, that would be a difficult undertaking. But I'll defer to Mark to help out with the question regarding conditions.
Senior Planner Brian.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Hamlin, specifically in these two instances, the Mare Mills Village Panorama and the Links View. In Panorama, we have reference to that the owner agrees to dedicate lands for parkland to the town of Collingwood in accordance with town policy in section 51.1 of the Planning Act as amended. So that's in the Panorama one. So it's a very general reference to the need to dedicate lands for parkland. So there's some flexibility there, but I would caution that the plan already identifies a specific block for the purposes of parkland in combination with a stormwater management pond. So right now, and I believe that represents the 5% maximum parkland dedication that is minimum or parkland dedication that's required under the Planning Act. And in the Links View conditions, I just had this. It's the same basic condition that the owner will agree by agreement to designate lands for parkland as required in accordance with town policy and section 42 and 51 of the Planning Act as amended. And again, in the case of Links View, specific blocks have been identified for parkland purposes at this time. In the case of Links View, there's a central park feature, and then there's a smaller park adjacent to an open space block. And of course, with the Links View subdivision, it is immediately adjacent to Fisher Field as well.
Thank you, Mark. Follow up, Councillor Hammond.
Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor. As you can tell from the nature of my questions, I'm concerned that we're approving a 3-year extension of these draft plans without our draft official plan exercise having been completed, and an opportunity for internal roads to be, sort of, just because we haven't had a policy in place to date. It's no one's fault. It's just how things have unfolded. So I would like to move that we shorten the period of extension of these draft plans to 1 year, at which time we would, instead of the 3 years that has been recommended by staff, and I recognize also that these applicants have all asked for 4 years because they want to have the water in place and they can just be ready to go. But I think there's still a bit of big picture thinking to be done here in terms of parks and roads and whatever else might come out of our official plan review. I think these plans are, I don't have any problem with the density or any, things like, the general product that's being recommended for approval. I think that they have been kicking around for so many years that finally our planning process is catching up to them. So I thought that by seeing if we could, as a council, limit their extension to 1 year, it would give time for our official plan process to catch up, an opportunity for an examination of whether any further land should be set aside here for park, and then we would have a chance to look at it again in a year. So I would make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to get a seconder right now. I'm going to go around the table to allow comment on the resolution, and then we'll come back for the amendment. Councillor Doherty, you had your card up.
Yes, I did. And I admit that this is a question that came to me this afternoon as I re-reviewed this agenda, and in particular, one of the letters from the consent agenda from the planner for Panorama North. They point out and ask about a couple of the additional conditions that have been added by our planning department to these conditions for draft plan approval. And I admit that I'm very much in support of the conditions that the planning department have added in general. However, there was one request from this planner for Panorama North that we should remove mention of our current urban design manual because it is 10 years old, because more than likely we will be developing a new urban design manual as we unfold or fold out our new official plan and zoning bylaws. And it seems to me that that request does have some merit. It would certainly, on the surface, ensure that we are allowing for best and most contemporary urban design practices. On the other hand, those items 6 and 7, having to do with urban design guidelines, do also say that the plans that would be submitted by our developers would be considered relative to the urban design manual and other plans or documents as they would come forward. So I guess my long-winded question is, by that addition of reference to plans that may come in the future for urban design, are we covering ourselves so that we are not stuck with forever considering urban design from a manual that is 10 years old?
Who would like to take that question? Our acting director of planning, Glenn, or senior planner Brian? Go ahead.
Through you, your worship, to Councillor Doherty. I think that the condition as currently worded provides us with flexibility to deal with any changes. There's a reference in the condition to any other applicable documents or direction.
Yes.
And the condition does conclude with the phrase "all to the satisfaction of the town of Collingwood." So that would allow us the flexibility, notwithstanding that there is a fairly strong reference in there to that these the documents that accompany this plan shall be in conformity with the town of Collingwood Urban Design Manual. And so I think that flexibility is there. And until such time as the Urban Design Manual is replaced by another document, then it is our primary reference point.
Thank you. Follow up, Councillor Doherty?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that gives me a much higher level of confidence with those two items. And thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions or comments on this motion? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Interim Director Glenn, I sent out a a question that I think we all got a response to. I just want to make sure I have a clear understanding of it. And it was to do with the 2 amendments to these draft plan approvals. I don't have a full screen. Is he with us?
I've got Director of Planning, and I think that's Mr. Glenn.
Okay, so my question,
Here he is.
Sorry, if I understood your response correctly, if the amendments weren't there, the things that are addressed in the amendments would be happening anyhow. Did I take your response correctly?
That's correct. Our view is that the conditions that we have in the draft plan extensions would address those matters, like the road transportation, like the internal networks, like the connectivity and the active transportation. And I think that the amendments that came forward provide a greater direction for staff, but the conditions that are attached do cover off those matters.
Thank you. Then I commend you on your communication skills, because that's exactly how I took your email. So if I may, Mayor Saunderson, can I request then that the amendments part be severed, just so that I can vote against them as they're redundant?
Okay, so the way the motion is worded, it doesn't refer to any amendments, but you're, I think, referring then to the last 2 paragraphs, Councillor Berman, and further that staff review each of the plans to ensure there is pedestrian connectivity and cyclist routes both within the plans and between each plan and surrounding community. And further that staff review the street designs in each of the plans to ensure traffic calming is built into the designs as much as possible. Are those what you're asking to have severed off?
Yes, because they're going to be done anyhow. So I don't want to make it redundant. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm going to look around and see if there's anyone else who hasn't commented that would like to comment. Then I'm going to go to Councillor Doherty, and then we'll go back to Councillor Hamlin to get her amendment on the floor. So Councillor Doherty, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just confirming that the extension of draft approval for Bridgewater is still severed and is not part of the initial vote.
No, it is part of the initial vote. I read it in as all one. If you'd like to sever off Bridgewater, then I will take that request. But right now, it's part of the main motion.
Thank you, Worship. I would like that severed, please.
All right. All right, and then we're going to go back then to Councillor Hamlin. You had a motion, you wanted to reduce the time of the extension from 3 years to 1 year. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's right.
All right, can I get a seconder for that amendment then, please? Councillor Comey. Any questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, I do have one through to Director of Planning. At the Operations Development Committee, we did talk about the timing, and I understood there was some concern about 1 year not providing a sufficient length of time for us to understand the changes to the official plan and then the changes to our zoning bylaws. And I'm just wondering if you can comment on the timing for us, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The comment that I did make at committee is that given the timing of your official plan will be fall, and the approval process that's typically and customarily with your official plan documents, 12 months may not give you sufficient time to have your official plan in place to be able to address the matters that Councillor Hamlin may want addressed as part of the draft plans. So my only caution is 12 months, we may be back saying we need another draft plan extension because you don't have the relevant policies in place. Or, for example, your urban design guidelines haven't been updated yet. Your zoning bylaw is not totally up to date yet with regards to matters. That's the only caution that I would give to council with the 12 months.
Good, thank you. Any other questions or comments, council? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote on the amendment, which is to reduce the extension period from 3 years to 1 year. All in favor? Opposed? And that is defeated. We'll go back then to the main motion, and we will sever off the Bridgewater residential plan of subdivision. And we will sever off the last 2 paragraphs, so that the motion we're voting on is to to receive the report and that council approve 3-year extensions of draft approval for the following plans of subdivision, including revisions to the associated conditions of the draft plan approval as contained in this report, with draft approvals to lapse on June 29th, 2024. And we will be dealing with Panorama, Mayor Mills Village, residential plan of subdivision D1202321, and Linksview residential plan of subdivision D1202221. Calling the vote simply on that portion of the motion. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Now we will add in the Bridgewater residential plan of subdivision, which is D1202121, which is the first bullet on the motion as it appears. I will call the vote then. All in favor? And opposed? Duly noted. And finally, we'll deal with the last two paragraphs, and they read as follows. And further, that staff review each of the plans to ensure there is pedestrian connectivity and cyclist routes, both within the plans and between each plan and surrounding community. And further, that staff review the street designs in each of the plans to ensure traffic calming is built into the designs as much as possible. And this relates to all three plans of subdivision. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? Unopposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So this brings us to motions. Item 12.1, amendments to the procedural bylaw. Staff questions and notices of motion. Councillor Madigan. I will turn it over to you, Councillor Madigan, to read in your motion.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Just trying to pull up the other screen. Okay, it's moved by myself and seconded by Council Berman that council directs staff to prepare the necessary procedural bylaw amendments to enact the following. Number 1, council to submit questions that require a staff response before a meeting to be submitted prior to 1 p.m. on Fridays for regular meetings scheduled on Mondays and 12 hours in advance of special meetings. And that members continue to be encouraged pursuant to section 2.9 of the procedural bylaw to submit their questions or clarify issues relevant to a matter on the agenda at least 12 hours prior to the meeting, which staff will be requested to address at the meeting. It is understood that these questions may arise at the meeting and they may not have known in advance. Number 2, that notice of motions wherein the member will be requesting the notice be waived be provided to the clerk and the CAO for distribution to all council prior to 1 p.m. on Fridays for regular meetings on Mondays and 12 hours in advance of special meetings if the matter is being discussed at the special meeting. And further, that staff include any further recommended amendments to future updates to the procedural bylaw, code of conduct, social media policy, or others regarding best practices that have been identified by staff, including further support for transparency between council, staff, and the public.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan, do you want to speak to your motion now or at the end?
I'll speak now, and then if I need to clarify at the end, if I may have the time to do that, that would be greatly appreciated. This motion was discussed at the Legion maybe a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And I wanted to bring it back simply for consistency and more preparation time for council and staff. There's nothing that kind of frustrates me more than to get a question, like Councillor Berman said, easier, that I'm unprepared or I haven't had time to do my homework. And I think this way it'll be better for everyone, staff and council. And we just want to be better prepared for these meetings. And I think that'll be a benefit to the public. So we're not coming back. We've instituted a fantastic committee way. So I think there's a lot of discussion and a lot of time leading up to this. And I just don't want to have staff and or more importantly, council, who are the representatives and the steward of our community, to ever look unprepared. So I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. Council, questions or comments on this motion? I've got Councillor Doherty. I think Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Jeffrey, then we're going to go through the whole roster here. All right, so we'll start off with you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the intent of this motion. in that no one wants to be caught with, trying to think of a non-colloquial way of saying this, caught unawares because of a question at the very last minute at a council meeting. I completely get that. And I think out of courtesy, I think all of us are very sensitive to the nature of our questions, whether they require a great deal of work and research, or whether they are questions that can be answered fairly simply because they are part of the thought process behind the staff report that we are considering. But by formalizing this kind of activity, I believe that we are completely taking all spontaneity out of our meetings. We are orchestrating our council meetings. And quite frankly, I think we run the risk of looking anything but transparent at our meetings. So I'm very strongly opposed to the first item of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Along the same lines, but not as strenuous as Councillor Doherty, but I have had some angst for a couple of years now, and I've expressed it on numerous occasions to the clerk, that I really feel that meetings are being run before the meeting. So the public realm isn't seeing the entire development of the information coming into consideration of our discussions. You know, particularly if a counselor asks one question on Thursday, gets an answer, asks another question on Friday, developing that, and then sends another question over the weekend to be answered by staff. And all of a sudden we've gone through 4 days of work, not in the public realm, and making decisions. And, you know, understanding that we all do our work on different timelines. Some of us are employed full-time, some part-time, some have other interests, whatever. As long as the wording is providing that, like, not every notice of motion can be eliminated by bringing this into the procedure bylaw. There will be time-sensitive things that come up that you just can't do by Friday at noon. It's just when the information comes to you. And so as long as there's going to be some leeway there in the development of the wording, and really, you know, staff having to respond to all of council with the information, to me, it's not that we don't want council to have all the information, but again, it's like running a meeting outside of the meeting. We're providing information for council to develop their thoughts and their approach going forward outside of the public realm. So those are my comments on it. However, we tweak the wording to make sure none of those things are offended as we go forward, then and maybe that will take the clerk addressing or the CAO addressing my concerns before we vote. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'll look to Clerk Thomas. Let's address those comments, please.
Certainly, as the motion and the bylaw has been drafted to reflect this, there is little flexibility. So if that is a priority to members of council, and I can completely understand where Councillor Jeffrey is coming from, it should be noted in there that there should be flexibility included, and then council would not be passing the bylaw this evening until we make those changes.
All right, I've noted that, Councillor Jeffrey. I will come back to you and see if you want to propose any amendment once I've gone around the table here. Next, I had Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I don't think that I will support this motion in any of its current format for a couple of reasons. I think one is that we have become far too structured, and I appreciate it. In fact, I like the committee structure leading it to council. I think one error that we've made is the fact that we have back-to-back council as opposed to committee council, committee council. And there's too far a lag between council meetings where we can react. And I think there have been a couple of occasions, although we didn't foresee it, we didn't anticipate having to be in a position of dealing with certain matters as it relates to COVID, but it didn't allow for the flexibility or the latitude or spontaneity as it related to making maybe more decisive decisions in a timely fashion. And I think this dovetails into the asking of questions. Unless staff is prepared to bring forward a report that, as part of their compensation review, that bumps counselor salaries up to 50 grand a year, and for the other two significantly above, and adds for additional resources, I think it's expected that the majority of counselors will either have commitments from an employment standpoint and or other commitments just in general, and need to be given some latitude as it relates to when they can review documentation that's provided to them. We all have the opportunity, if a matter comes before council, to refer it, defer it, ask it for it to be kicked down the road for additional time. And I think that would be the case here, that if something comes before council and it requires additional clarification and you as an individual don't have the appropriate time because of other commitments, which is completely reasonable, that you would simply ask for something to be referred or deferred. And as it relates to the second part, the notice to be waived, I guess because I may be guilty as charged, have used that the most of any around the table, certainly as of recent, I think it goes back to my first point, and that is that given the way our structure is set up right now, it is one of the few opportunities that we've got to be proactive in bringing forward things that we feel are important to make effective change immediately, as opposed to waiting for the next meeting, et cetera, going through a process that would take a period of time that maybe isn't as efficient. And I can think of a couple of issues that we've, in my opinion, proactively responded to by using the waiving of notice of motion. So for those reasons, I won't be supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Next, I have Councillor Hamlin.
Mr. Mayor, in fact, I have nothing further to add to my esteemed three previous councillors' remarks, and I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berman.
I think I was in the queue. Thank you. I've jotted some notes down. I'll be in the minority, obviously, because I seconded this because I support it. But I think this is sort of a tip of the iceberg thing. I look forward to the fall when we get a chance to go over the code of conduct, the procedural bylaws, and so on and so forth. We were all elected as the board of the directors for the corporation of the town of Collingwood. We pass a budget that's roughly $100 million a year. We've got over 26,000 residents. And I say this in general, but these meetings to me have turned into a little bit of evening at the Improv. So I think that what I took from Councillor Madigan's motion is, let's try to stop that. Let's be a little more efficient, a little more productive, and a little more respectful. We all went through a number of trainings. The four incumbents from the previous council went through one or two trainings with Fred Dean, who was a municipal expert. We went through a training that we all attended for 2 days with Strategy Corp. We've had a number of emails and such that we've addressed through the clerk and through the CAO as far as things that would, I guess, be best practices in my terms. And we're not doing any of it, in my opinion. The length of these meetings, which the councillors that I speak to, I'll say, are too long. I looked today and I looked at the last 5 meetings that we've had. 5 hours and 1 minute, 5 hours and 54 minutes, 6 hours and 42 minutes, 5 hours and 50 minutes, 4 hours and 30 minutes. That's unprepared. To me, that's unprepared. We have all of the work in front of us. We're not doing it. Just by comparison, and I looked these up during the meeting at the start, Deputy Mayor Hall, when you were on council that passed the sale of Collis, that meeting was 1 hour and 15 minutes. the night that your council did the sprung structures. That was a long one. I was in the audience 5 hours and 24 minutes. And to the incumbents, the night that you voted in favor of a judicial inquiry, 3 hours and 9 minutes. My point is that I don't think it's that this council is dealing with any bigger or more important issues. I think we've gotten in a lot of bad habits on things that we have been trained not to do. And all 9 of us were at these trainings, and none of us objected to the things that we were taught were best practices. So I don't think Councillor Madigan's motion goes far enough. It seems from the people that have spoken that it will be defeated tonight. I'll support it, and I will gladly open up the other policies and bylaws that will be coming according to the clerk in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berman. Next, I have Councillor Comey, then Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Well, I would take great exception to the idea that while I often have a dissenting opinion to those at the table, I never once consider it night at the Improv, or that the queries that they're presenting aren't genuine and out of concern for the taxpayers they represent. I find this motion extremely concerning. I would side much more with Councillor Doherty's opinion on this. We are in the midst of a water crisis, and I find it surprising that at this particular junction, any councillor would be seeking to put any type of limitation around our duty to ask questions on behalf of our taxpayers. It is actually our job. And such a procedural burden would not be tolerated in any other professional environment that I can really think of. I can't imagine going before a board of directors and being asked for an update on something and telling them I couldn't get back to them because I didn't receive their question 12 hours in advance. It simply wouldn't be tolerated. And I'm not going to ask our taxpayers to tolerate that from the people they have elected. So I agree further with Councillor Doherty. This translates to our residents as the complete opposite of open and transparent government. It's 2021. The world is moving at the speed of light, and we say we're Tech Hub North. We can think on the fly. We can ask responsible, reasonable questions in a timely manner. And I do not think for 1 minute that the length of the meeting is reflective of a council that is unprepared or not working. I see it as the exact opposite. And for that reason, I'd very much like to request a recorded vote. Thank you.
Duly noted. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I'd like the 2 items severed, please.
Sure. Any other questions or comments on that, Councillor?
I have some thoughts, but I'm conscious of the time, and so I'm loath to give them. Although what I will say is that I'm pleased with the parenthesis on the end of item number 1, which is it is understood that questions may arise at the meeting that may not have been known in advance. As a person who spent 25 years asking people questions, I can appreciate that sometimes spontaneous questions bubble up in the course of the previous answer. And I know that I am probably one of the worst offenders in that department, asking questions that only occur to me during the course of the conversation. Anyway, that's I'll just ask for the severing, so that's fine with me. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got the Deputy Mayor, you had your card up. Did you want to make further comments? And then I've got Councillor Hamlin.
I won't belabor this, but I'll get to the point. I'm quite offended by Councillor Berman's comments. And the way this is worded is that I am supposed to receive an agenda that comes out at about 4 p.m. on a Wednesday, read through the agenda, formulate my questions, craft them, draft them, and send them to staff and expect them to respond in an appropriate time. I love what I do, and I can't think of a job that I paid less for in terms of the number of hours divided by pay or divided by salary. And quite frankly, when I look at my calendar and I look at the hours that were put into the mayor's task force for COVID, the mayor's task force on affordable housing, the number of hours that I sit at the table for the BIA, for the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, all for the sum total of $0. I think you can afford be the latitude of being able to read an agenda as a single father with another career on my timeline and have the opportunity to formulate conversation with the appropriate staff to have answers or questions answered prior to a meeting. To Councillor Comey's point, I mean, this is 2021. We live in a community that celebrates the entrepreneurial spirit, and any entrepreneur would tell you they don't work on timelines like this.
Thank you. I think we had Councillor Hanlon had a card up for second comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's more, yeah, it's a general comment I have, and like Councillor Berman, I do think a bit about how long our meetings are, and because of the hours I know I put in, I don't think it's because council is not prepared. I do think, and I offer this as an observation for later discussion, that as our municipality has more, as our municipality grows, we are dealing with more complex issues, whether it's complex development questions or not having enough water, or you can look at our agendas and see what we're dealing with. Very different from, I'm sure, 10 years ago when, we may have still been considering, line fence issues. I mean, it's just totally different if you have a 3,000 person community compared to 35,000, and we're heading to 35. So I just say, I think we're in growing pains. I think that we will, in the fullness of time, as other municipalities have, move to daytime meetings because you can't fit it all in the evening. It will mean that we will shift to full-time counselors, and with an increase in pay along the lines that Deputy Mayor Hall has discussed. But anyway, I know that's not a discussion for tonight, but it is something I think about quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. And I think if anyone's expecting a raise, you got about a 15-year wait, but let's hope that changes. I'm going to go to Councillor Madigan for last word, and then I will make some comments. I don't know if you want me to go first, Councillor Madigan, or you to go first.
It's okay, man. I kind of get the gist of it. If I can just talk to a couple of them. So Deb, Councillor Doherty, I definitely appreciate that you're thinking that I'm trying to take the spontaneity out of the meeting. Absolutely not. I just believe that with all the complex issues, I just want to have the answers. I've never been one to question the professionals because I'm not an engineer, I'm not a planner, but I do try to ask questions of those professionals, and I try to do it before. I'm not saying everybody doesn't. I just know what I've heard from the community, and that's why I brought this forward tonight. Councillor Jeffrey, I appreciate that you think time sensitivity is okay and meetings are happening before the meeting, and I tend to agree with that. I agree absolutely that meetings are happening before the meetings. And I want to make sure that everybody is prepared for that because we're elected as 9 strong. Deputy Mayor, I have right beside it, hates it all. Keith, Deputy Mayor, you've said that you waive notice of motion the most. I love the way you do it, though. You let me know, all of us know well in advance, so I can appreciate your comments, and I don't take any offense to them. Everybody else said nice stuff, but I just have hates it all beside it. Councillor Comey, I totally can appreciate yours. We're moving at the speed of light. I think I have 31 years of entrepreneurship, so I understand that. And I did make mention once to the water crisis, and I never wanted to take any questions out of it. I know questions arise at the last minute. I just want to make sure that staff have the time to inform us properly. We're making such big decisions that we all need to be informed. I get that this vote is going to tank and I'm going to lose horribly, and I'm cool with that. Thanks so much, Marion, Councillor McLeod, for appreciating the end of it. I know questions are going to pop up. I just want to give staff the latitude and the rest of us the latitude to stop these gotcha moments where we're trying to get them, or where people will always say when they watch these meetings, "Oh, Bob, your facial expressions are the best." I wear my heart on my sleeve. It's right out there. So I just want to get our community back to the way it is. Councillor Hamlin, I understand that we are changing. I've lived here my whole life, born and raised. So we were never 3,000 when I was born, and I'm 49 years old, but we are moving in the right direction. So the population's always been quite strong, and we've always been a very active moving forward committee. I thank you. I await your comments, Mayor Saunderson. I don't expect any positivity, but that's okay, my man. And I am happy to have it recorded. Thank you so much, everybody, for your comments and the education.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. And my comments, I hope, will be positive in the sense that, I see the council and staff working together. We are all pushing this corporation forward, I think. We went through our community-based strategic plan. That is our roadmap. We do work together, but we do have tough decisions, and we do have fulsome discussions and opinions. We don't want groupthink. We want us operating on different levels and bringing different perspectives. And that's what makes us, I think, stronger and challenges our staff to rise and make sure that their reports are thorough, and where there are gaps, to answer to those gaps. And we're all in this together. And this has been an extremely trying term, as the deputy mayor said during the election. The things that we talk about during the election rarely turn out to be the issues that really confront council. And nobody predicted COVID. Nobody predicted the water shortages, and so we have had some very big issues come up for us, and we have to have full discussions around the table. We do our best to keep it high level and on principle, and I appreciate the intent of the motion. We have been working hard to try and refine our processes. We've had a number of discussions. We have made many changes to our processes in terms of 2 committee meetings and then 2 council meetings, so that we can have 2 weeks between each for further reflection and questions. We've worked very hard at trying to hone those processes so that when we hit the council table, we are directed, and we have, I think, done a very good job on making sure that the motions that hit the floor are not being crafted on the fly, so that the end product is for the best interests of our community. And it is, it's a living thing. We are going to evolve as we go. We have to keep these intentions in mind, and we have to work together. And I think the issues raised in the motion it's where practice hits procedure, and it's a fine balance between being overscripted and underscripted. And so I think it's something that council and staff have to continue to work on. So I appreciate the intent of the motion. It has been severed, and we do have a request for recorded vote. Before I call the vote on section 1, Councillor Jeffrey, I did say I would come back to you if you had any wording changes for paragraph 1.
No, Mayor Saunderson, I just, again, to do them on the fly tonight, I thought we had pretty in-depth discussions at the Legion when we discussed it previously. And I do think you're right, where procedure hits practice, we just all have to be respectful of, and that we're being concise and succinct and practicable. So I can't think of an amendment. I'm happy if it's going to go back to staff. They're hearing what we're saying tonight. If they have any recommendations going forward, when it opens up again for the discussions with all the documents, that there might be something we can do to help us.
All right, thank you. So then I'm going to call, we've got a request that it be severed. So I will call the first paragraph of Councillor Madigan's motion. There is a recorded vote, so I'm going to pass it to the clerk.
Certainly, Your Worship, just members of council, we actually have 3 components to this. So the 1, 2, and the final and further that. So are we good with dealing with those 3?
I'm looking to Councillor McLeod, who made the request, and I got the nod. So I think the answer to that is yes.
Perfect. So with respect to the resolution, including only item number 1 at this point, all those in favor, please raise your yes cards. Thank you. All those opposed, raise your no cards. That component is defeated. On the second, number 2, all those in favor, please raise your yes card. Thank you. And all those opposed, please raise your no card. That component is defeated. And the last and further that line, all those in favor, please raise your yes card. Thank you. And all those opposed, raise your no card. And the motion is carried.
All right. Thank you. That was a good discussion. A nice kind of procedural link there for us to take a pause and look at that. Item 12.2 is recommend changes to site plan control bylaw. It's Councillor Hamlin. So I'll look to Councillor Hammond to read in her notice of motion.
Thank you. The council requests a staff report on site plan control bylaw and procedures as to whether any changes or alternatives would be recommended, and that staff report back at the September 13, 2021 Development and Operations Standing Committee meeting.
I'll get a look for a seconder to get the motion on the floor. Councillor Doherty, and would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor?
I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This rose out of an item that was on our last Development and Operations Committee agenda last Monday. And it has to do with where we have older buildings in town that were constructed before site plan would have been required. And then the current owner would come along and ask for, say, an extra building on the property. And so we've been dealing with them to date on a fictional basis. We say, let's approve an amendment to a site plan control agreement, even though there's no site plan control agreement. So I posed this question to our acting director of planning as to whether this was the best approach for dealing with this. And it was his recommendation that I asked for this staff report so that he could look at whether procedures should change or whether the site plan control bylaws should change. And it was his suggestion that it come back on September 13, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments on the motion? Councillor McLeod. And then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I appreciate what Councillor Hamlin has just had to say about asking our interim director of planning regarding this. I'm not doubting you. I just want to hear it from him because it seems to me that our planning department is busier than a one-armed paper hanger right now. And I would just like to be sure that they actually have time to get stuff back. Sorry for the colloquialism, to have stuff back to us in such a record time.
Director Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to council. This matter did come up at committee, and taking a quick look at the site plan control bylaw, I think that there is an opportunity to do a review of it. It's not a significant matter to take a look at. It's a matter of a housekeeping, and bringing that back in September, I think staff does have their plate full. But it is an opportunity to clean something up.
Hello, Councillor McLeod.
I am mollified. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So I support this. I did see correspondence from the interim planning, director of planning, saying that he thought this would be a good process. But my question probably goes back to our procedural discussion we just had, is giving a notice of motion at committee. Had Councillor Hammond been required to give her notice for development and operations to consider sending it to council, it might have been better. It takes a little bit longer, but it's just something we might look at instead of having, because we built that system for the committees to do the work, not council to do the work. So if we need, or ask for the development operations to waive notice to ask for that report and get the response, I just think it would work better rather than sending the work to council. And this could run more smoothly.
Duly noted. I don't know if Clerk Almus has any comment on that. I mean, I guess what I would say initially, I thought the notices of motion went through the SIC because that was a committee, like a committee of the whole. But in any event, go ahead, Clerk Almus.
certainly, Your Worship, Councillor Jeffrey is correct in that we do allow notice of motions at the committee, and how it's worded in the procedural bylaws, it comes up at the next regular meeting. So I appreciate the comment. All of the discussion today recommended procedural bylaw items forward in September, and I think that is something that we can take a look at. I know that there was a concern about committees providing direction on further staff reports and having it addressed by the committee versus council deciding as a whole. But I think that's something that we'll definitely review.
Yeah, thank you. Any follow-up, Councillor Jeffrey?
No, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion, council, before I call the vote on this? All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we have a motion 12.3, request from the Simcoe County Food Council, deputation June 7, 2021. And the motion reads that council endorse the Simcoe County Food Security Framework and direct staff to identify an appropriate staff point person to represent the town of Collingwood as needed and based on capacity to work with the Simcoe County Food Council on future initiatives. I'll get a mover and a seconder, please. And then I think I'll ask the CAO. So I got Councillor Berman and Councillor Comey. I'll look to the CAO to provide a little background, please, and maybe who we'd be looking at in terms of appointing a point person. Go ahead, please, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. The intention here in drafting the staff recommended motion is that we see food security as something that's important in the community. However, what we have suggested is that we have a point person. So there's someone for the Simcoe County Food Council to talk to at the town from a staff perspective. That can go to meetings when they're required, but potentially not every meeting. And that can really work to help align the work of the Simcoe County Food Council and the food security framework with things like our, I'm going to call it a round table, but I can't remember the exact name of it right now, our social services round table. So what we want to do is align with them as opposed to jump right in and deliver work. This is something that really to date has lived at the county level. So I think that this is an awareness piece and a good way for us to become engaged and to do a better job of keeping council engaged as things might change at that council, the Simcoe County Food Council, I mean. And I think it probably would be someone from Executive Director Culver's shop who would be dealing with the alignment and participating in that social service side point role. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Council, any questions or comments on this item? I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Sorry, through you to the CAO. Is this the position of Jennifer Parker that would be aligned?
CAO?
I think it would be best for me to refer that question to Executive Director Culver, please, about Jennifer Parker potentially being the point person.
Executive Director?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Jen and I have spoken about this, and generally speaking, it would live in our joint area. We would look after it jointly. She's also got a very heavy workload, so we're conscious of that, but understand that she's probably in the best position to provide support here.
Thank you. I appreciated the Freudian slip on the part of the CAO in reference to a change in council and in which council she was referring to. So thank you for clarifying. And lastly, I gave quite a lashing to Mr. Berman, sorry, Councillor Berman, with regards to his earlier comments. But one of the better decisions between 10 and 14 of that council was through a provincial grant, was the creation of the position in which Jennifer Parker now occupies. And I think that as a legacy, it has been a fantastic position, and she does great work. And this is just one more layer to that position. Thanks.
Thank you for that. I thought our 2014-2018 council was going to take credit for that, but we'll let you have that one, Deputy Mayor. All right, seeing no other comments, I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us to item 13, the bylaws. 13.1. The bylaw number 2021-43 being a bylaw to amend procedural bylaw number 2019-75 to include deadlines for requests for clarification and notices of motion. Be enacted and passed. We don't need that one. We don't need that one, right, Sarah?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. We'll scrub that one. And that takes us into 13.2, that bylaw number 2021-44 being a bylaw to appoint an inspector, plans examiner for the enforcement of the Building Code Act within the town of Collingwood be enacted and passed this 21st day of June 2021. I'll look for a mover, seconder, and then I'll just look to the CAO, maybe just give a little background on what this is for. So I get a mover, Councillor Berman and Councillor Hamlin. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. The plans examiner position, which is this appointment, is considered a building inspector, and building inspectors are appointed by council. So this is a request that you appoint the plans examiner as a building inspector. So I think it's relatively routine. However, it is up to you to do so.
Thank you, CAO. Any questions or comments, Council? Go ahead, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So my same old question. When we add these layers to the cost of building homes, do we weigh in? I know it's important to have enough staff to turn things over quickly enough, but do we weigh in the other side of how much we're adding to the cost of homes in such a critical period for affordable housing and attainable housing?
CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that that's a difficult question, but largely the Building Act has some very specific requirements that homes are constructed to, and when we take on these tasks to do those inspections, we're making sure that the requirements for safe homes, for homes with good water, good air quality, and the many other factors that come into play are in fact executed per the legislation. We do, when we come forward in the budget, I can't remember exactly how this one came up, but I think it was related to a backfill because we had put someone into a position where they would be doing more complex inspections for higher rise buildings. At least I can confirm that after the meeting, but we look in the budget to make sure that we have the actual capacity, we have the triggers that we need to hire someone else to do this type of work. And I think that there is, I know that there is another piece on the operational plan, which is the fees review. So it's coming up. It's currently scheduled in this year, although there's some potential it may be pushed out a bit. But the fees review looks at exactly what the fees are and how they balance the staff and what the processes are that staff go through. So I think that that project will serve as an operational review of the exact question you're asking now, which is what fees do we need to charge and why to support exactly what department, like what staff department structure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. And so the follow up to that is just because that department is self-funded, so those fees go directly to the building. It's not the tax impact that gets spread over the masses. It's very specifically going to the house building components, which is kind of why I always ask that question. So I appreciate what they do. I know it is what they do, but I'm just saying, are we doing it the most affordable way to keep the housing costs down?
Duly noted. Any other questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that brings us then to notices of motion, item 14. Are there any notices of motion today, Council? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Following the deputation that we had earlier this meeting, I am bringing notice to provide relief in the case of the deputation that was brought forward today. And I will have wording to that end provided to the clerk first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you. Any other notices of motion, council? Seeing none, that takes us on to the county report. Deputy Mayor, do we have anything for today?
I don't, and there will be next week, given what is on the agenda tomorrow. But I'm happy to answer any questions at this point.
Any questions for the Deputy Mayor? Seeing none, that takes us to item 16.1, old or deferred business. Is there any other? Well, 16.1.1 has been withdrawn. Is there any other old or deferred business, council? Seeing none, we get to 16.2, other business, and 16.2.1, townwide speed limit update. Who will I be passing this to? Director Slama. There you are, Peggy. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'll speak to the memo that was provided to council and the public, and Manager Velick is also here to answer some questions. So at the May 31st council meeting, council held a discussion on a notice of motion that was brought forward to implement a town-wide speed reduction of 40 kilometers an hour. Following some discussion, the item was referred to staff for further information on options to consider for the implementation of such a decision, and including timing and costs. So the memo provided to council outlines 4 options that are intended to for council's review when they're looking to develop the motion. As part of the memo, staff have included the reminder that we're continuing to develop our knowledge on the better ways to blend transportation with active transportation. We do recognize that in the community-based strategic plan, active transportation is an important element. And the strategic plan speaks to supporting a healthy living lifestyle through active transportation. And we do understand that safety is a paramount concern with this goal. The memo also provides some information on how traffic safety is looked at from an engineering perspective, and that it is a comprehensive approach. And it does consider a lot of different elements such as traffic data, collision data, road geometrics, items like that. We also provide some comment on how speed limits are established, are typically established through, a process that has been developed in the engineering profession. And this typically includes investigation into site-specific traffic data and uses established guides for setting the speeds. So incorporating all of these best practice engineering components, we have provided 4 options. Staff are recommending option 3, which considers a level of investigation and recommendation on setting the speed limits based on data. It draws from experience of other municipalities, and it considers area where the reduced speed limit will provide the most benefit when we look at costs as well. I'll quickly go through the scope of option 3. So it looks at retaining a consultant to provide a comprehensive review report. The scope would include a review of experience from other municipalities that have looked at this. I will say we were able to do some research in the short amount of time. And many municipalities in Ontario, most of the larger municipalities have implemented a reduced speed limit, so if not, most of them in specific areas through the town. And we're seeing more smaller municipalities considering this alternative, including our neighbors at Wasaga Beach, who did ask staff to provide a report and decided against the motion. But many are looking at it, and in all of the cases, we did see that staff did complete some review and investigation and looked at providing that guidance to council with their recommendation. So again, back to our option 3, sorry. So we will review the experience of other municipalities. We'll review research into the effectiveness of speed reductions. We'll look at regulations and the standard process that's followed for setting the speed limits. We'll conduct some town-wide speed studies, review collision history provided by Ministry of Transportation, consult with the OPP on elements that they would like us to consider and some of the challenges that they've experienced, engage with the public to measure support for this initiative, provide recommendations as to whether speed limits should be reduced, and if so, where. So this might be targeted areas, or it might end up being a blanket reduction across the town. Provide the cost to install required signage, and also provide this all in a summary report and presentation to council. We're proposing that this would, an estimate on the cost for a consultant to complete this work would be included in the 2022 budget deliberations this coming fall. And the task would be one of the operational tasks for 2022.
Thank you, Director Slama. So I'll open the floor to questions, but just to be clear, what we're looking at tonight is putting options on the table to be debated and discussed at the next council meeting. So we're not limited to one option. If there's consensus on an option, that's fine, but also we can have a number of options on the table, and we'll be looking at them and discussing them as individual notices of motion next week. So with that being said, I'll open the floor for questions to Director Slama. And then if anyone wants to put an option on the floor, it will be carried forward to next meeting. I've got Councillor Berman, Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Can I just put option 3 on the floor when the time comes?
You can do that right now.
I'll do it right now then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Well, I would second that option. But my question therein is it would be referred to the budget for consideration within the context of the entire budget. We're not making the decision now that no matter what it costs, that will appear in our budget.
I believe that's the case. I'll look to Director Slama for confirmation.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through the Mayor to Councillor Jeffrey. Yes, thank you for mentioning that. You are correct. It would be considered within the budget request. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll second 3.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 things on my mind when I looked at this report. One was the report we received from the consultant who we asked to give us advice on traffic calming. And the second is the report the OPP brought forward to the Police Services Board last week on the major hotspots for traffic accidents in our town. And I'm sort of left thinking about that perhaps this would be my recommended approach. Firstly, in terms of reducing the speed limit, I think there's 2 parts to this, if I can start again. One is reducing the speed limit from my perspective. And secondly, is addressing the major roads in our municipalities where we know there's a lot of accidents. And unlike the OPP, who's limited to looking at how can we enforce these hotspots better and what kind of education can we do? As a municipality, we can say, oh, let's look at these hotspot areas. Do we need to, take away a left turn lane somewhere? Is there a need for another stop sign? Is there all kinds of intersection things that could be done to solve issues? And so I see them as combined but different. So firstly, on the speed reduction, when we had our consultant on traffic calming come forward, the first thing he mentioned as an advantage to traffic calming was that it reduced vehicle speeds. And then he gave some stats on why that was important. And it was because if a pedestrian gets hit by a car going 50 kilometers an hour, they're not likely going to survive. 50 kilometers an hour, they're not likely going to survive. If they get hit at 30 or 40, they have a better chance of survival. And this is what I believe has prompted a lot of other municipalities, including Orangeville, to just say, how much will the signs cost? Let's put them up in our community. Today, I started thinking, it reminded me of the debate that happened what seems many years ago now, but should we have rules on whether you can drive when you're impaired? Right now we think that's funny, but at the time, well, how will we ever enforce that? And, is that a good idea? And, do we have to study this? But there's so many organizations now that are supporting reducing speeds on local and collector roads to save the lives of our pedestrians and cyclists. I don't, it's my respectful view that we don't need to study this and have a big report done. And so I wouldn't, vote for option 3 because I just don't think it's necessary. We can just look at what's before us. But I would take part of option 4 to look at our hotspots areas. And these are the ones the OPP reported on last week. And the areas are no surprise to anyone who drives around our town. It's all of your Ontario, all of First, all of Mountain. And that's where, the accidents that they get called on to are located. And so it did strike me that what we needed for that would be this road safety management process. And I typed out some words here earlier in the meeting. So I'd be asking as a second part to this, that council directs staff to obtain budget estimates for an operational performance review regarding the 3 major hotspots of Hurontario Street, First Street, and Mountain Road, which will identify contributory factors to accidents, as well as implementation of countermeasures, which will select appropriate improvements to address issues identified in that operational performance review. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Council, we're picking options. We're not voting on any options. So if you want an option, you just put your hand up. And I guess, Councillor Hamlin, if I took what you said, you want option 1, which I think is to implement or to engage the public, and part of option 4. So maybe what I'll do is I will leave it with you to connect with the clerk to put your wording together, and these motions will be debated next week at the council meeting. So we've got option 3 on the table and hybrid proposed by Councillor Hamlin. Are there any other questions or comments or proposals, Council? Councillor Comey, and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, through you to Director Slama, thanks for a great memo and a solid presentation. I really like the way you queued that up and you explained it. To my colleagues, I would say I love the wording of option 2, because to me, it's exactly what everyone from the public wrote in to say. And it starts by saying, simply proceed. There was option 2 is to simply go ahead and get it done. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just physics. There had been a comment when we debated it from one of the councillors that was like, oh, I don't want to vote on feelings, I want to vote on facts. And I had an engineer write into me and be like, it's just physics. And those are the facts that you need. Slower, increases chances for survival. We know other municipalities are doing it. When it comes to more studies, I would strongly caution the idea that I'm of the opinion our community is really not a fan of hearing their council is looking to invest more money into more consultants. And for reference, I really appreciate Treasurer Kunlin had sent to me, because I was curious, our traffic calming study was $8,000. Our PRC master plan, which of course is a great promoter of all of our active transportation, was $200,000. And our cycling master plan, which had filled chock-a-block with brilliant ideas, $35,000. So my point is that I didn't support our UN resolution tonight because they continue to worry about our ability to really weave together everything from our climate emergency to all the plans and studies we've already done, and the grand commitments behind something like the United Nations, which actually promotes a 30-kilometer-an-hour speed reduction, and then an option 2, which is to simply proceed. So I'm very much in favor of us responding to how this intertwines with all the commitments we continually say that we're making to a greener town, a greener commitment, and active transportation. That's it. Thanks.
So to be clear, Councillor Comey, are you putting option 2 on the table?
Indeed, yes.
Good. All right. Duly noted. And then I have the Deputy Mayor, I think.
Thank you. A couple of comments and maybe questions that could be dovetailed into next week. So generally speaking, I'm very supportive of seeing a reduction in speed limit and taking a proactive step to blanket as much of the community as possible, recognizing that we may have to work with our counterparts, specifically at the county as it relates to, I guess, the popular intent, if we want to go that far in terms of a true blanket of the community. I wanted to make a comment, and I want to be very upfront when I say I'm sort of paraphrasing this, because I think I have it right, but I'm also 10 years older. The Council of 2010, one of the very first things that we did, if I remember correctly, is we canceled a speed reduction that had been put in place for Highway 26 West. I think the previous council had actually put a speed limit that went from 50 right from, say, I'm going to say Balsam out to the west, to the county line with Town of Blue Mountains. And first thing that we did is we bumped that back up. And I'll never forget, and I'm paraphrasing, and please just take it for what it's worth. I was having a conversation, and it was with a police officer. And it was a police officer who was not from the area in terms of jurisdiction, but a police officer who had a place up here. And he said, I don't know how your police officers can enforce the rules and not have people successfully challenged time and time and time, because our area, and not just specifically to Collingwood, but as a region, is so inconsistent in terms of our speed limits and how you go from a 50 to a 60 to an 80 within a very short period of time. And just there were far too many loopholes in which somebody could challenge if they so choose to do so. So I just make that observation that I am very much in favor of moving forward, because I agree with Councillor Comley. The science matters, and the science dictates that the evidence is there and you support the evidence. But we want to be sure that we're not creating something that is not enforceable. And the one thing that has become loud and clear, I think, is that the comments that I saw online, or some of the few comments that I actually received, there were a few who flat out said, go jump in the lake. That's fine. But I thought the vast majority were acknowledging that the community is getting busier. Traffic is far too fast, particularly in certain areas. And they're pleased to see that Councillor Hamlin continues to move this forward proactively. But then they would pause and they would say, but whatever you do, make sure it's enforceable. Because, I mean, we can put up all the signs we want in the world, but if we don't make it enforceable in terms of the police being able to proactively enforce, and/or if we don't take the next step through budget processes in years to come with really good traffic calming measures in terms of bump outs and encroachments and things like that, that actually will force somebody to slow down, simply putting in a self-imposed speed limit isn't going to make a whole host of difference. And where I've seen and I witnessed firsthand, I think, some really positive things, and it does dovetail into communities that have lowered speed limits, is the way that they're doing it, where you literally, I was just in a community where for the first time, I had never seen this on a regional road, not a municipal road, but a regional road, where they had the yellow strip signs in the middle of the street as you're proceeding through a township into a city on a regional road. And it was telling you that you're going from an 80 to a 50. So it's just, they've made the conscious decision that they're going to lower their speed limits further out from the city limit, but they've also taken the next step to really be proactive in not putting a sign on the right-hand side where you would traditionally be looking for a telephone pole to tell you what the sign is, but they put it in the middle of the road where you either run it over or you pay attention to what's in front of you. And I hope that when we're going through this exercise, that we make sure that we put some money behind what we're saying, so that the men and women who have got to actually enforce these policies have the teeth to be able to do so. And at the same time, we make it as consistent as possible so that our residents will say, you know what, oh, I get it. And I'm going to adhere to these policies. And I know what the game plan is. I know what the rules are, and I can follow them. Because the sort of the piecemeal that the region has right now, where we've got so many different areas that are 20, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and even 90, when you look at the parkway between here and Wasaga Beach, it's very piecemeal. And so I'm very supportive. I applaud the efforts of Councillor Hamlin and others to date. And I just hope that, 2-3 years from now, when this is truly implemented, that people look back and say, you know what, that was a really well thought out, methodical, executed plan, and it's working. And at the end of the day, no one cares whose name goes on the side of the building. There'll be no plaque that says, by the way, Councillor Hamlin reduced the speed limit, but people will just be appreciative of the fact that something was done to proactively reduce the speed in the community. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wanted to just talk a little bit about, briefly about the physics and traffic calming and speed from just an engineering perspective. The physics are really clear. If you get hit by a faster moving vehicle, then you're more likely to get hurt or killed. However, the speed limit is not a speed limiter on your vehicle. People still drive to the speed they feel comfortable. So there is some, and just like traffic calming, there's some things that make you slow down, like a bump, but a lot of traffic calming is also psychological. You'll plant trees very close to the side of the road, or put up barriers that make people feel less comfortable with the speed they're driving. So while I 100% respect the intention of council, to potentially just get on with it or do a study, whatever it is, I just wanted to say that there is a bit more to the science of speed limits. We do, should the limit be lowered, need to convince people to adhere to that. Part of it would be enforcement, and part of it would be community acceptance and the social acceptance of driving at that speed. And part of it will be the perception of the roads as we move forward. And I think that we can work those things out together depending on how the votes go tonight, and in the subsequently when we deal with this item. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. So I think we have on the floor options 2, options 3, or option 3, and then a hybrid of option 2 and option 4. Are there any other options that some council would like to put on the floor before we leave this topic? Okay, so this will be coming back next meeting. Councillor Doherty.
My apologies, I had to dig through my cards. Are we precluding any further discussion of this?
No, Councillor. What we're doing is picking the options that are going to come back to council next week to be debated as motions. So all of the options that are on the table will be debated next week as potential actions for us on this staff report. So this is really just a precursor to the discussion next week.
Sure, I understand, but we've already got an option on the table that's a hybrid of one of the options. So what I'm saying is, do we need to debate the whole thing tonight, or can we have a fulsome debate next week when this comes back?
I think it would be better to have the fulsome debate next week when it comes back, because we'll be voting at that point.
Thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other options at this point in time, Councillor McLeod?
Sorry, I have other business. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Well, I think we've had good discussion on this, and it'll be coming back next week. So some time to think about it in preparation for next week. And I don't see any other takers on the traffic speed limit. So I will look for other business, and go ahead, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I am curious to know when we might see a staff report or a suggestion on when we will have a new representative on our BIA. I understand that we had a resignation on May the 17th, and I think there's some pretty important stuff that's taking place at the BIA that needs a council representative in attendance.
Yes, I've had discussions with the deputy mayor, and he continues to serve on the BIA board and intends to stay there, but I'll look to the deputy mayor to confirm that, please.
Thank you. I will continue to represent council at council's wish.
So, and I appreciate that. I know it's busy, but the deputy mayor has done an exceptional job working with the BIA, and I don't see any reason to replace the deputy mayor at this point.
Okay, so do we need to have a rescinding of that, or is there I don't know what needs to happen.
I'd be more than happy to speak to it.
Okay,
so
go ahead, deputy mayor.
I think I had sent out an email. I'd have to go back and look, but I think I sent an email to each of you indicating that I was prepared to resign immediately. And it was in response and frustration to the fact that you asked me to represent you and spend hours of my personal time to do so. And in bringing back a matter of consideration, that matter was defeated. And perhaps my email was in haste, but quite frankly, I was quite annoyed the fact that we couldn't have the opportunity to continue the conversation. I know that at least one, perhaps others have voiced their concerns specific to that matter. I consider it now closed. I'm very disappointed, to be quite frank. Councillor MacLeod, you know better than anyone. You asked me the specific question after the fact, something to the effect, well, I didn't know it was so important to you. Well, why would I bring it back to the table if I didn't think it was important? So it has not been a pleasant year. We've got all things that are better, that I'm sure that we could do better with our time. I'm happy to continue if you so choose, and if not, so be it.
Oh, you've been doing a great job, Deputy Mayor. I think we will leave you there. Thank you for the clarification, and we're going to move forward. Any other business tonight? Councillor MacLeod?
Just to clarify, I didn't know any of that. Didn't know that there was anyone attending. So I'm happy to have heard that. And as the person who nominated the deputy mayor to attend the BIA, I'm thrilled that he's continuing, but I didn't know that was taking place. So thank you. And thank you for the clarification.
All right. We have some in-camera business tonight. Is there any other business, council, before we move on? Seeing none, I'll get Councillor Madigan.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I just sent you an email and the clerk and the CAO. I honestly didn't think that we would still be meeting, and I have a restaurant-wide staff meeting that I have to attend via Zoom at 8 p.m. So I apologize. I will not be taking part in the in-camera.
Thank you, Councillor Madigan. We'll note that in the minutes. So I'll read in the resolution 17.1. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct a closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Therefore, be it resolved, this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to 1, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposal of land for town or local board purposes, item B. 2, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or a local board, item A. 3, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, items A and B. And 4, position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. It's item B. And the items for discussion tonight, A is an LPAT appeal, Blackmore Gates, and B, 41 here Ontario Street easement. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman and Councillor Doherty. I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. And I'm just going to look to the clerk. Do we have a separate link for this in-camera session, Sarah?
No, Your Worship, we will remain in this meeting.
Okay, so it's just coming up 8 o'clock. I suggest we can be in the in-camera session at 10 after 8, and we will be on this this link. Thank you very much, everyone.
Excuse me, Your Worship, you're live again.
All right, I'll look for a motion to rise from in camera at 10 o'clock. Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? And we have our confirmatory bylaw, the bylaw number 2021-45 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the regular meeting of council held June 21st, 2021 be enacted and passed this 21st day of June, 2021. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Berman, all in favor? And the clock is striking 10. And I will look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. All in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Productive meeting. It's the longest day of the year and you got 2 hours to enjoy it. Take care, everyone.